Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jerry Bees, and we've listened to nu metal here on the channel before, but a new challenger has entered the fight, as today, ending our January theme of listening to Grammy-nominated albums, Grammy nominations for 2026, we have Private Music by Deftones. I do like Deftones. I've heard Deftones before. I've actually seen Deftones live, kind of. So I've listened to Around the Fur. I've listened to White Pony. Not as maybe analytically? Yeah, sure. As I have with all the other albums that we react to here on the channel. But, you know, before I started reacting to music here on YouTube, I definitely did peel into those albums. Really like those albums. Great workout music. And then I went to a festival, and I did sit down for the Deftones set before I left that set to go catch Sublime with Rome. I wanted to make sure that I was close for that. I just love Sublime. What can I say? So I only really have those two albums under my belt, but I know that Deftones, their reputation precedes them, right? One of the biggest names in the nu metal space, you know, alongside their contemporaries, you know, Limp Bizkit, Core, and all those other bands, right? That were kind of leading the way for this new sound of, you know, harder edge kind of music that was coming out of the late 90s, early 2000s. You know, and we were just kind of talking about this before we started recording. You know, Deftones, those first few albums even, and it probably even extends to their later work. You know, it's just like, it's just sexy. It might get the juices flowing, for lack of a better word. But I knew that Deftones' Private Music, the album that we're going to get into today, was highly anticipated. Wanted to listen to it when it dropped, but that's what I'm kind of doing here for these January reactions. Looking back at some pretty marquee releases from the end of 2025, or really just in 2025 in general, that we finally get to get caught up with. But I know that they have plenty more music that I haven't listened to, so I don't really know what current Deftones sounds like. I think this was their first release in several years, maybe even a little bit longer. So I'm excited to get into this. It seems like it's a pretty short album. But let me know down in the comments how this album stacks up against some of the other Deftones releases, as well as any other thoughts that you have on my thoughts as we go through this album. If you want to catch us live when we react to music and albums, go ahead and check out my links down in the description. And if you happen to miss any of those live streams, go ahead and check out my Patreon, where you can get all of these reactions uncut well before they come out on YouTube for just $1. And in February, I do plan on making some video essay kind of type shit. Those will be available on Patreon as well. Very excited to get into those, guys. Let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know what to expect, really. You know, like I said, I haven't really listened to any of even the more recent Deftones things. So this, we'll figure it out. This is Private Music from 2025, 11 songs, 42 minutes, 29 seconds. First track, My Mind is a Mountain. Well, let me tell you, I was not expecting it to go that hard. I think usually when you see a band, and I hate to say this, they are a little bit older now, right? They're in their 50s. Didn't expect it to go that hard. That was terrific. Short, simple, to the point. It's simple in terms of composition, but I mean production-wise, it's so loud and so wide. So they're definitely following suit to where, I think I speak for a lot of Deftones fans or people that are familiar with their music. It is quite atmospheric, and here they're really pulling from negative space in Dark Cycles, right? It says it right here. This sense of anguish and frustration's really coming through the instrumentals there. And I gotta echo what Benny said here, because it's one of the first things I was thinking. Chino sounds exactly the same as he did 30 years ago as he does now. If you don't know, Chino is the vocalist for Deftones. And it starts out with, signature Chino, right? The cold escape. It's a lot of that, right? Deftones is a lot of that. I can see how that would be very annoying. And it's definitely might be overplayed in some of their older music. We'll see how much that's called back here, especially for me, not having listened to a lot of the newer Deftones. But I really like it. I think that sets the vibe, sets the atmosphere for that, kind of sensual kind of metal that they do, or what they're known for. But did not expect this to be as aggressive in the composition and just how loud it is. I mean, this is so fucking loud. Deftones also incorporate a lot of shoegaze type production, which really gives that signature atmosphere. Yes, thank you for saying so. It is shoegazy in the sense where we do it's very chord based, and they let it ring out. You're just a cool kid looking at your shoes, right? If you've ever seen South Park, with like the emo kids, the goth kids, and they just kind of look down at their feet and shuffle. That's kind of what shoegaze gives. I know tons of goth kids that love Deftones. So it's kind of perfect for that. Maybe a much harder My Bloody Valentine kind of a deal we got going on. So we're off to a terrific start so far. Really excited to see what the rest of this album has to bring. Lots of love.
Cruise on its style. When it says, stepping out proud from the gates. Symbolize the
Doom
truth.
metal.
We accept it's time. Rise from the floors. Curate truth.
Drummer.
Feeling the crowd. Locked in. Collapse in your room.
Wow. This is just starting off like a rocket. So, as Benny properly clocked in that first song, it makes sense through a lot of Deftones, and from what I've heard, definitely pulls from shoegaze. But here, like, the distortion on these guitars and how they're playing it gives like doom metal, just like very, very sludgy. And I really like it a lot. This is all kind of new to me, especially from what we listen to here on the channel. So apologies. I do like to get into lyrics. I've been missing the lyrics here on this one. Who's my guy on drums? We'll Google that right. Abe Cunningham. A tip of the cap to you, sir. The rhythms that he's using are insane. Should I say polyrhythms? Is he playing something a little out of sync with the rest of it? Because it does stand out so much. It doesn't really feel, this isn't a 4/4 kind of thing that we're doing here. So, maybe a lot of the time, if you're listening to like prog rock, maybe all of the instruments, they're playing in a certain time signature, but maybe the drummer and the guitarist, they're playing in different time signatures. That's a polyrhythm, right? That's an easy way to explain it. There might be more to it. If somebody wants to comment on a better way to explain polyrhythms, please do say so. But but I'm getting something a little out of left field here, and I'm liking it a lot from the percussion. Yeah, I don't know why I was feeling, I could tell you exactly why. I had this worry, it's Deftones, are a little bit older, right? Maybe they'd mail it in. No, man, instrumentally, they are killing it right now, and that includes Chino. I think you can include his voice as part of the instrumentals here, as with a lot of bands. But what they're doing, and something that I really appreciate, it seems like they're mixing his vocals in with the rest of the music, mixing it like it's an instrument. Whereas with like a lot of pop artists, and that's not to say that this is right or wrong, this is just what it is. And it makes sense for, given applications where, a lot of pop artists, the vocals are at the top of everything. That's the most important thing. That's the personality right there. That's kind of why you come to those certain artists or those certain projects sometimes. But maybe, there's a great feature, or it's the particular producer that's on it that kind of sends it all home. But here it seems like they're putting Chino's vocals right in the middle of everything. And it might sound a little chaotic, might sound a little bit muddy, but here it's perfect for what this is. Long story short,
it's good shit, pal.
Yes. Ecdysis, ECDY-sis. Pop off, sis. Okay, we got shoegaze, we got doom metal, we got industrial. I mean, this one's all rhythm here. I mean, this bass. What does that remind me of? I think that reminds me of American Cliché by Filter, which would make sense with it sounding a little bit more industrial. Let me see. Am I thinking of the right song? Yeah. So, the name of this guy escapes me, but he was one of the founding members of 9 Inch Nails. Richard Patrick, right? 9 Inch Nails kind of did the whole industrial electronic thing, especially, towards the, their earlier projects and stuff. And, some of the elements here in the start of this one, definitely kind of industrial. So like, where is this calling me back to, especially how that bass sounded? And it took me back to American Cliché by Filter. Filter's great. If you don't already know Filter, you should get into Filter. Great hard jams, great soft jams. Yeah, this one was all rhythm for me here. And it sucked. Like I am not like paying attention to the lyrics at all. And that's just how it goes sometimes, I guess. I don't doubt that there's interesting things to pull from this, but also like at first glance, plague, bones, winds, ghosts. It's all kind of vague. Maybe a similar sense to some of the songwriting that didn't really grab me so much in a lot of the Linkin Park reactions that we did. It's kind of just blanketed in all of these words that kind of just give a certain emotion or feeling or themes of, destruction, death, loneliness, things like that. Whether or not they're used to explain how those things are overcoming us or how we're fighting through those, that's kind of where I'm lost a little bit. But I don't give a shit because it sounds so goddamn good.
Oh yeah, faux shiz.
It's produced so well. Who's Deftones as the main producer? Abe Cunningham, the drummer, credited as composer, as well as Chino, right? Being the lyricist here. So this seems like a kind of like a home-baked thing for them. I don't know who they've worked with in the past as far as producing goes. That might just be this track. I didn't check the other ones. But job well done, boys. Job very well done. By the way, Bees, the title means the process of shedding old skin in reptiles. So this word that I can't pronounce, the title of the song, means that. Also produced by Nick and a name I'm not even going to bother pronouncing. Okay, moving on. Infinite Source. You listen to a song, you listen to an album, and you go, I love music. So this one, I just got done saying how I wasn't really understanding any of the lyrics, or none of them were really grabbing me. This one did, and I think this one is because it reminds me a little bit more of some of the Deftones that I've heard. It's a little bit more familiar in that sense. Definitely not at a faster pace, but at a very steady tempo here. To me, this is almost like a love letter to their fans when they're, or just their happiness in playing live and in front of people. Here's for the years, 1,000 dreams, face the crowd, keep holding me close and tight. Yeah, I mean, this outro too, just. My man Abe going crazy on those crashes. They might be rides. I don't know. The cymbals, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, this one, it had a little bit more of a major key tone here in some of these, or at least there were major chords incorporated. I almost feel very, very uplifted by this one, and I think the lyrics really, really match that. It might, our final wave and bow, this love that we chased and found, last slide we'll ever take, our final wave and bow. Maybe to say, like, we'll be doing this until we die. That's what I'm getting out of it. I don't know about you. Souvenir. This is such a loud album. Holy shit. My goodness.
As you drift off in bed, resign out. I'm hovering in space, embracing
I'm scared. Oh, all right. So I didn't know that it was going to transition perfectly into the next song. Had I known that, I would have kind of mentally prepared myself from that. So we will go back a little bit into Souvenir before we get into CXZ here. But, you know, often here on the channel, we talk about song placement. We talk about how an album is paced out. And these first songs are just balls to the wall. I mean, they're pulling from different genres, but it is still sounding so consistent. It's seeming like it's a very cohesive piece here so far. But even then, you know, as much as I might like it and really appreciate all the sounds that I'm hearing, how they're bringing forward the elements, this album is mixed beautifully. Some things can get, not to say stale, but they do kind of blend together. So, you know, it might be a little bit of a struggle for me at the end of the reaction when I'm making my conclusion, trying to pull some things back. You know, things can get a little bit muddy if it's too consistent, right? You know, oh, I'm just nitpicking. I can never be happy. But here, it's a long song. It's just about halfway through the album, and they slow it down towards the end of the song, you know, especially in those like last like 90 seconds where it's, you know, just those synths, you know, just kind of isolated, does help break out the album, gives us some space to breathe. And especially knowing that this is kind of a part one to a part two following into CXZ that we're about to get into. You know, we can look at that as like the halfway point. We can look at that as, you know, two tracks that kind of help break apart what is otherwise kind of very chaotic here. In Souvenir, though, you know, I love the way that it built up, especially around here when Abe's going crazy on the drums. And then Chino's vocals there are just so good. It sounds very uplifting here, you know. You know, this is another one where I didn't quite clock the lyrics, but it's given like, I don't know, man, like happy but not. You know, we ride. You know, so that we own it. It's divine. So maybe this is kind of calling upon something in yourself to, you know, just kind of go on and continue, maybe with the company of somebody laying beside me, holding you tightly. That could be a person. That could be just an aspect of their personality that they don't want to let go. It could be a number of things, and there's no telling quite how many things that is. But really, really liking how this is moving along so far, not only as the songs that we've heard, but as a cohesive project here. So we'll spin it back here on Souvenir as we get into CX. And those synth tones are just so damn good. CXZ, baby. fuck? Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Holy hell. Ugh. We gotta run that shit back. Hold on. You know what? I used to, and maybe I still do. You could probably argue that I still do. Speak too soon. I tend to eat my own words. This is not only one of the best rock albums that we've listened to here on the channel. This might be one of the best albums we've reacted to here on the channel. I am so impressed with so many aspects of this release so far. I mean, you know, I kind of ate my own words by saying that, like, you know, we might continue this, you know, easier sounding vibe as we, you know, come out of Souvenir, but we go right back into it. And this is one of the most chaotic songs, I think. I mean, it's just percussion up the wazoo, and then to break it apart like that. You know, I can't tell you how many times that I was actually flabbergasted at a switch up. You know, I'm often interested by switch ups, right? I think you'd be hard pressed not to be. But that was just really something. It just can, you know, we're getting into just beating the ever living shit out of the snare to whatever the hell this was. So I don't know if that's a clap with the, like on a drum machine with some bass going on there, and then just to pull it all the way back with no build up to it, just go right back into those guitars. Why have I never listened to Deftones like this? I mean, I'm like way more in tune with this than I have, you know, Around the Fur or White Pony. Now, that is to say, I haven't listened to those albums like I listen to albums on here, right? You know, I am a little bit more engaged doing it this way. You know, I mean, there's times where I put on an album, you know, to listen to it for the first time, but if I got to wash dishes or like take a leak, I'm going to wash dishes or take a leak. That's not necessarily what I do here. You know, I'll pause it in between songs, or if we have an ad, we'll stop for that. I am, you know, pausing to talk about what's going on and my thoughts about every individual track. But I'm really adoring this. And I think Deftones found themselves a new fan in me already. You know, because I highly doubt that the rest of this album is just going to be like a complete snooze fest. I think the quality of rock that we're getting out of this, it's loud, it's aggressive as maybe any other metal should be, as interesting and as groovy as any alt rock band would be, but there is this cerebral aspect to how things are kind of composed, and I think that is shown off perfectly here in CXZ as it comes out of Souvenir. You know, it tripped me up. I thought we're getting into some more peaceful shit, and that's not the case. And then this break right here. This, I think about you all the time.
We say
gorgeous vocal production on this one. Oh, I love that. I love that chord progression there. Resolve it. It resolved. Okay. For this month, January, right? Grammy-nominated albums of various categories. We can only fit in 4. What am I saying? I can only fit in 4. And so I was like, well, let's cap off Linkin Park. Let's get into some Kendrick. Let's do Haley Williams. All of them have been very good. And usually I'm like, I don't give a shit about the Grammys. I still don't give a shit about the Grammys. But, it has been pretty validating to listen to all of these albums and them having all been pretty good. And actually, I hate to say it, Kendrick's been the weakest. But I bring that up just to say, I've been so impressed with all of these albums this month. Yeah, this song alone. And also with how chaotic CXZ was into this, it does help with the pacing a little bit. It does help break things apart. Even though that drop was really strong, I think we get some of that dynamic. I think this song is making it all around more dynamic, because a lot of the song is so unaggressive as compared to everything else. Milk of the Madonna. I mean, it's just more of everything that I've already said. What I mean, percussion wise, this little thing that he's doing, like I gotta like pay attention to this because I'm hearing the snares, I'm hearing the kick drum, and I'm hearing the hi-hat. But it doesn't make sense to me how he's playing the hi-hat and playing the snare at the same time. So just like you'll hear the hi-hat that's okay, so it's kind of like he's kind of playing the exact same beat, but on the hi-hat, on the snare, on the hi-hat, on the snare. I think I got it like it's, and this is what I love. This is what I live for when I'm doing music reactions, when it's intriguing me enough to really get into those very nitty-gritty details. And, there's nu metal, there's shoegaze, there's industrial, all these other things that they're kind of pulling from, which, is really no surprise. I think, it does sound pretty consistent from things that I've heard from, 20 years ago, those albums that I've listened to. I can't necessarily comment with a great deal of confidence in how they've kind of evolved their sound. But, just to say that, like, whether it's shoegaze or nu metal, you have these fat distorted guitars that fill up your ears and just hug them, or maybe you feel as though they just put you down and they kind of suffocate you. But they're doing all these little things, whether it's, instrumentally with, Abe behind the drums, or it's Chino and how they're mixing his vocals and maybe, throwing it into an echo in the right channel and then just making it fade out in the left channel in the last song, and I Think About You All the Time. In the beginning of that, they're really throwing his vocals all around. And they didn't need to do too much. This is almost too much, but it's not. It's fantastic. Everything is it's not overstaying its welcome at all. Even in that longer song, even with Souvenir being, 6+ minutes, around the 4.5 minute mark, we start to get that outro into CXZ. By the way, this is unprecedented. I don't necessarily remember song titles like this during reactions. I'll say in that other song or a couple songs ago, right? I might remember how the album feels in general or call upon some things that may have happened. But as far as like song titles, no, I think that's just telling you how much I am vibing with this. All right, 3 songs left. Cut Hands. This one was really fun. Getting a little Fred Dursey up here, ladies and gentlemen, especially just with Chino's vocals here on this one. It felt a little bit like it's Limp Bizkit, right? It teetered on that, and I can't recall from memory if in some of the other Deftones albums I've listened to, he kind of goes for that kind of style where it's just like a little bit more shouty. Yeah, I mean, especially because this one's a little bit funkier too. I think it's a little bit more bumpy with how it's going. I think Abe is kind of taking a backseat as far as not trying to make anything too complex here with this one, and I think Chino's vocals and his delivery kind of match that a little bit here. It's as good as everything else has been. Oh my God, I'm having such a fun time with this one. At this point, listen to it, I almost want to like quit streaming and quit recording the video and just listen to these last 2 songs for myself. Just like, bye, I'm done. We're moving on here, and this is really what I would call the album, Metal Dream, tilde Metal Dream.
Into the heart of the abyss, searching for a sun. In your dreams, always see all the golden shades laid ahead. To your chest, bathing in the crystal-coated bricks where anyone exists. Saying I don't.
We found the sensual Deftones, everybody. So, like I said at the beginning of the reaction, I was kind of going over my knowledge base on Deftones. You know, certain songs, it's very sensual, right? It's a bedroom rock almost. You know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more. And I'm getting that a little bit here. You know, the B-side to this album is so fun. I mean, the whole album's been really fun, but, you know, we're getting some funkiness out of the composition, out of Chino's vocal delivery here. Crash into the forest bed, breathing deep, I sink into your chest. Who knows what this is actually about? It's not like I read lyrics or anything. Swaying out of consciousness, hear the morning bells as we embrace, deeply enthralled in your gaze. I mean, this is just foreplay. This is just foreplay. I believe you called it sexy nu metal, I think is what I called it as well. Yes. And maybe that's erroneous to call it that. Please do let me know. You know, but I know that, you know, Deftones gets kind of grouped into that class of, you know, genre-defining acts or era-defining acts, you know, like Korn or like Limp Bizkit, like Deftones. You know, I often hear those bands brought up in the same breath. You know, it seems like, you know, if you were coming to age in the late 90s, early 2000s, you were spinning this, System of a Down. Last song, and it's a bit of a doozy, it seems. Just about 6 minutes long. Let's see how this ends. Departing the Body. Oh my God. Does it have to sound so scary and be titled that? I really do think they're saving the best for last here, which is insane.
It's clear.
Is that Chino? Okay. Twinkles for what? This is soul crushing. And that's it. That was Private Music by Deftones. Kind of sad because I'll never be able to listen to this for the first time again.
Oh yeah, Foshi,
It's good shit, pal.
You know, I guess before I reach my conclusions about the album as a whole, for this, you know, it's an interesting idea. I don't think it's quite right, but I love where your head's at, and you know, I like thinking about this. It might not necessarily be what the song is about explicitly, but we can pull threads from songs or from the title of the album, from the imagery on the album cover, through its art direction, to see how some songs are kind of inspired, or you know, all the little bits that add up to the sum of what an album is in all of its themes and concepts. So the song title is "Departing the Body," and I love this here. Aylid here in the chat says, wait a minute, is it departing the body as like when a snake does when it sheds its skin? And I really do like where your head's at here. It seems as though it's a little bit more of an existential thing. Again, certain verbs like split here, right? He helps split these days apart. I can see where that's at. Going back to a famously controversial line of reasoning that I entered into here on the channel was during Taylor Swift's Folklore, where, there are those 3 songs. Is it Betty Cardigan in August, right? Where, those are the 3 songs that kind of tell the story of the album. But I think, you're selling it real short when you realize that, there's way more to talk about in that album than just those 3 songs, and how other songs can be interconnected because of the other themes that we're talking about. And so here it might be a little bit more abstract, but that might kind of peel into the psychology of where their heads was at, where Chino's head was at when he was kind of putting together the ideas here. They didn't come out maybe as strongly as maybe a lot of the other albums, but again, this is a first-time reaction. Sometimes I need to spend a little bit more time with it, as far as lyrics go, as far as concepts go. But this last song was as good as any other track in terms of instrumentals, in terms of the sonic nature of things, and having it be a little bit longer, just a second shy of 6 minutes, really puts us at a good pace as far as allowing us to kind of stew in some of the soundscapes. So it begins with something that's, it's a little bit more spacey. And of course, we know that the drop is going to come, and, it lets us down gently by the end of it. We know that not only the song is over, but the album itself is over. So as far as pacing goes, this was a very, very suitable and proper way to end this project, I think. I'm just going to get into the conclusions part here. If anybody tells you that rock is dead, delete them from your life. Do not talk to them, unfriend them, block them. Never listen to anything they have to say again with any type of validity or trust, because Private Music by Deftones exists. Absolutely love this. And we've listened to a lot of great albums this month. From Zero, Ego Death at a Bachelorette Party, GNX, and now Private Music. And maybe it's because I'm a little bit more of a rock and roller, right? Maybe that's more of my real wheelhouse in general. So this comes to me with a little bit more ease. But, that's like, I think back to, God, like another 90s, early 2000s band that still, put out some great music into the 2000s, like Queens of the Stone Age. I love them for different reasons than I love, like, Pink Floyd, and, they're like a prog rock band or anything like that. Or, like, some of the metal that I really enjoy, or some of the hardcore that I really enjoy. It is really something. I didn't really feel this way when I was listening to Around the Fur or White Pony. But again, I didn't necessarily listen to it in the same context. I'm really trying to peel into this and concentrate on it as much as I possibly can. And I'm so glad I did. Chino's vocals reminds me of another album that we listened to here fairly recently on the channel, What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis, and how I said, like, Liam Gallagher could say and sing anything, and I just love the sound of his voice. The way that he takes his melodies just meets my ears with such ease and satisfaction. Chino's the exact same way, but even more so than Liam, because it's Britpop, right? So, vocals kind of stand out a little bit more. And they do here, but Chino really feels as though he's an instrument in the mix. It is so part of the soul of everything else that's going on, and just anything that comes out of his mouth, any sound fit every situation in which it was used in. Abe motherfucking Cunningham put on a clinic in terms of the percussion. You know, he played it loud, it was aggressive, but there was tons of finesse there. There were so many instances where he's playing just these very odd rhythms. And I guess, you know, he's credited as composer, so I don't know, is he the one really directing a lot of the compositions just in total, you know? I never really pinned them as like a drummer band. But that's really what came through. And that's not to say that, like, I mean, the bass was terrific. I mean, especially on the ecdysis, right? I think it was that one. You know, the one that reminded me a little bit more of like Filter there, right? Where it's just a little bit more bass forward. Actually, a lot more bass forward, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, the sounds were just so deep and so wide to where the moments that you have of silence or where they bring it down, it feels like an oasis. Not to, you know, no pun intended there from bringing up Oasis, but it really just makes you feel like so light, and then you're just ready to get back into it. At really a moment's notice, you know, I was kind of floored, you know, when they kind of brought it down just all of a sudden with the percussions, went into this other beat and then went right back into it, you know, and I loved, like, you know, like that part where I'm trying to figure out how he's playing the snare and the hi-hat at the same time, or is he playing it at the same time? I couldn't tell, and I was listening to that part, you know, multiple times over just to try and figure it out. That's what I love in an album. When you intrigue me enough to really get into the nitty-gritty and all these little minute details, a few seconds of a composition, and maybe the composition in and of itself is very complex, but it's just those little moments in time as we go through really intrigue me. And I actually, looking at this album cover, I thought it was an illustration, but it looks like this is like a real photo of a real snake. Yeah, I really do think that Deftones found themselves a fan. Like I said, you know, like the hits, right? Going back to everything from Around the Fur and White Pony, you know, those just like generational defying songs. I like those quite a bit, but this has really galvanized me to get into their discography a little bit more. Should I react to it, or should I just do it in my own time so you know that I'm listening to it? Because if I react to it, it might take a while. But if you want more Deftones here, depending on how well this video does, I guess, please do let me know, and I'd love to do it with you guys. But I don't know how much longer I'll wait, because I'm really fixing to get into this band a little bit more. So impressed with this. One of my, you know, knowing that this came out in 2025, I'm listening to this in 2026. Really beat myself up for not getting to this sooner, for not listening to it sooner. And I think I'll try to do a proper best of for 2026 as we focus more on new releases here on the channel, because this probably would have been my favorite album of 2025. You know, you know, there's like smaller bands like Pile that I really like. Their 2025 release was one of the best records that band has put out entirely. I say band, but it's just the one guy. Rick, if you're watching this, I fuck with you real heavy. I know you read your subreddit. So that was my reaction to Private Music by Deftones. I loved it a lot, but did you hate it? Why did you hate it? If you loved it, why did you love it? Did you agree with my takes? Did you hate them? Please let me know your thoughts on my thoughts down in the comments below. Like I said, I'm not completely opposed to listening to other Deftones on here, but I'm not going to give it a ton of time before I just start listening to Deftones on my own. If this video doesn't do like terribly well. So I guess you'll be the first ones to figure that out. If you want to catch us live, please check the links down in the description. And if you want to see any of these reactions, maybe even this one, uncut in full, we did gab a little bit when we weren't listening to music. But if you just want to come and hang out, check us out live. But if you want to see these unedited before they come out on YouTube, go ahead and check out my Patreon. We can get exactly that for just $1. Aylid says, if you hated it, you have no taste. Go eat shit. But with all that said, I've been Jerry Bees. You've been awesome. Take it easy.
Diggity dog. Breaking. Diggity dog.